Hey, stop whatever you are doing and listen to what I'm about to tell you. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and type where you are viewing from in the comments section. I'm reading every single comment. This video is the story of a man who stood on stage at a corporate event, barefoot, drinking tequila shots with his employees at 9 in the morning. His company was valued at $47 billion. 6 weeks later, he would lose everything. This is the story of Adam Neumann, the man who convinced the world's smartest investors that renting desks was worth more than Ford, FedEx, and Delta Airlines. The man who turned office space into a religion. And the man who walked away with over $1 billion after destroying one of the most spectacular corporate disasters in history. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. Was Adam Neumann a con artist? Or was he just giving people exactly what they wanted to believe? Let's go back to 2010, New York City. 2 Israeli immigrants are struggling to make it in America. Adam Neumann is 6'5", charismatic, and has already failed at several businesses. His friend Miguel McKelvey is a quiet architect with big ideas about how people should work together. They have a simple observation: offices are lonely. Freelancers and startups are isolated. What if you could create a space where people didn't just work side by side, but built a community? What if going to the office felt like belonging to something bigger? They call it WeWork. Their first location opens in Soho. It's different from other shared office spaces. There's craft beer on tap. There's a company mantra on the wall. There are regular parties. Adam walks around the space like a pastor, greeting his congregation, hugging people, learning their names, asking about their dreams. And people love it. Within months, that first location is full, then another location opens, then another. But Adam doesn't see himself as a landlord. He sees himself as a revolutionary. He tells investors that WeWork isn't a real estate company. It's a tech company. It's a lifestyle company. It's a movement. 2:30. Here's where things get interesting. In Silicon Valley, there's a formula for success that had been working for years. Take something old, add technology and design, call it disruption, raise massive amounts of money, grow as fast as possible, worry about profits later. It worked for Uber. It worked for Airbnb. It worked for Amazon for years before they made a single dollar in profit. Adam Neumann studied this playbook like scripture, and he realized something crucial. Investors didn't want to fund a boring real estate company with slow, steady growth. They wanted to fund the next world-changing tech unicorn. They wanted vision. They wanted scale. They wanted someone who believed they could change everything. Adam could give them that. He was a natural performer. He spoke about elevating the world's consciousness, about creating a future where people didn't just go to work, they found their purpose. He said WeWork's mission was nothing less than to make a life, not just a living. And investors ate it up. By 2014, WeWork was opening a new location every week. The formula was simple but expensive. Lease buildings on long-term contracts, renovate them into beautiful shared workspaces, then rent out desks on short-term, flexible agreements. Fill them with young companies and freelancers who loved the aesthetic and the community. The problem: the math didn't really work. WeWork was paying for 30-year leases on buildings, but earning revenue from members who could cancel anytime. They were spending millions on free beer, elaborate parties, and renovations that turned ordinary office buildings into Instagram-worthy wonderlands. Every new location lost money, but Adam had an answer for that: growth. If they grew fast enough, eventually the profits would come. Scale first, optimize later. It was the Silicon Valley way. And the money poured in. First million, then hundreds of millions. Investors valued WeWork at $1 billion, then $5 billion, then $10 billion. Inside WeWork headquarters, something strange was happening. The company was starting to feel less like a business and more like a movement, less like an office and more like a church. There were all-hands meetings that felt like revival services, with Adam Neumann as the charismatic preacher. Employees would cry during his speeches. They'd chant company slogans together. They genuinely believed they were changing the world, not just renting desks. Adam created traditions that reinforced this feeling. There was summer camp, a massive annual party where thousands of WeWork employees would gather for days of drinking, partying, and listening to Adam deliver passionate speeches about their mission. There were regular "Thank God It's Monday" parties. The message was clear: your work isn't just work, it's your identity, your community, your purpose. Former employees describe it in strangely religious terms. One said it felt like being part of something transcendent. Another said questioning the company's strategy felt like betraying the mission. Another said Adam had an ability to make you feel like you were part of something historic, like you were building the future itself. This wasn't just corporate culture, this was belief, this was faith. And Adam knew exactly what he was doing. By 2017, WeWork was everywhere. New York, San Francisco, London, Shanghai, Tel Aviv. Beautiful spaces filled with ambitious young people working on startups, drinking craft coffee, attending networking events, posting photos with the WeWork logo in the background. Adam Neumann became a celebrity CEO. He was profiled in major magazines. He spoke at conferences alongside tech titans. He partied with celebrities. He cultivated an image somewhere between Steve Jobs and a spiritual guru, wearing leather jackets and talking about consciousness and purpose. The valuation kept climbing: $20 billion, $30 billion, $40 billion. WeWork was worth more than established corporations that had been around for decades. Adam's personal net worth was estimated at over $4 billion on paper. And then something magical happened, something that would change everything. His name was Masayoshi Son. He was the billionaire founder of SoftBank, a Japanese investment firm that had made a fortune betting on tech companies early. He'd invested in Alibaba when it was nobody. He'd funded Yahoo before most people knew what the internet was. He was a legend. And Masayoshi Son didn't just like WeWork. He loved it. He loved Adam. He loved the vision. They met for just 12 minutes. 12 minutes. In that meeting, Son pulled out his phone and showed Adam a slide. It was a chart showing how much SoftBank wanted to invest in WeWork. The number kept growing on the screen: $1 billion, $2 billion, $4.5 billion. Adam Neumann walked out of a 12-minute meeting with a commitment for $4.5 billion. No detailed due diligence, no skeptical questions about the business model, just belief, just faith in the vision. This was the moment that changed everything, because now WeWork had essentially unlimited money. They could expand anywhere, do anything. The sky wasn't even the limit anymore. Here's what happens when you give a charismatic leader unlimited money and tell him he's a genius. The vision expands, the boundaries disappear, reality becomes negotiable. Adam didn't want to just revolutionize office space anymore. He wanted to revolutionize everything. WeWork started acquiring companies that made no sense. They bought a wave pool company. They launched WeLive, an apartment rental business. They started WeGrow, a private school where Adam's wife Rebecca would teach children to be conscious entrepreneurs. They talked about launching WeBank, WeSleep, even a WeWork airline. The logic was always the same. We're not just an office company, we're a lifestyle brand, we're a way of life. People who work at WeWork should live in WeLive apartments, send their kids to WeGrow schools, save money at WeBank. It was vertical integration for your entire existence. Inside the company, concerns were growing. Executives would present financial projections that showed they were losing staggering amounts of money. Adam would dismiss them. He'd say they were thinking too small. He'd remind them of the mission. Sometimes he'd fire people who pushed back too hard. And Adam himself was changing. The money, the fame, the constant validation, it was doing something to his judgment. He bought 5 homes worth over $80 million. He flew private jets everywhere, sometimes burning $400,000 on a single international trip. He trademarked the word "we" and then sold it back to WeWork, his own company, for nearly $6 million. His wife Rebecca, who had no business experience, was given major responsibilities and allegedly fired employees because she didn't like their energy. There were bizarre stories. Adam allegedly brought a shoebox full of marijuana on an international flight. He would arrive late to important meetings because he was surfing. He once told a staffer that he would be the first trillionaire and would also become president of the world. The emperor wasn't just wearing no clothes. He was running through the palace naked, and everyone was too afraid or too convinced to say anything. But the numbers don't lie forever. By 2019, WeWork was losing money faster than almost any company in history. Not thousands of dollars, not millions. In 2018 alone, they lost nearly $2 billion, $2 billion in a single year. Think about what that means. They were burning through about $5 million every single day. To keep the lights on, to keep expanding, to keep throwing parties and providing free beer and maintaining the illusion of success. But remember, this was all part of the plan. Growth first, profits later. It had worked for Amazon, for Uber, why not WeWork? Adam had an answer for every concern. He created new metrics that made the company look better. Instead of reporting actual profit and loss, WeWork started reporting something called Community-Adjusted EBITDA, which was basically profit if you ignored most of the costs. It was like saying you're wealthy if you don't count your debt. Wall Street analysts were skeptical, but they'd been skeptical of Amazon too, and look how that turned out. Maybe Adam was right. Maybe this was just what disruption looked like. And then WeWork announced plans to go public, to have an IPO, to sell shares on the stock market and raise even more money. This was supposed to be the crowning moment, the validation of everything. Adam would ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. WeWork would be valued at $65 billion, maybe more. Adam would become one of the richest people in the world. They filed their paperwork with the SEC. Everything a company does, every detail about how it operates, has to be disclosed in these documents. It's called the S-1 filing. It's hundreds of pages of financial data, risk factors, and corporate structure. And when people started reading WeWork's S-1, the spell broke. The S-1 was a disaster, a complete, unmitigated disaster. First, the losses, $2 billion in a single year, with no path to profitability in sight. The more they grew, the more money they lost. This wasn't growth stage losses. This was a fundamentally broken business model. Second, the conflicts of interest. Adam Neumann didn't just run the company. He owned buildings that he leased back to WeWork, personally profiting from deals with his own company. He'd borrowed money from WeWork using his own stock as collateral. The We trademark situation. It went on and on. Third, the corporate governance. Adam had special supervoting shares that gave him complete control. He could do whatever he wanted, and nobody could stop him. He'd inserted bizarre clauses into the company's structure, like one that said if he died, his wife Rebecca would choose his successor. Fourth, the risk factors section read like a comedy. It included warnings that Adam's personal conduct could damage the company, that they might never be profitable, that their entire business model depended on real estate markets not collapsing, on the economy staying strong, on 1,000 different things going right. Investors read the S-1 and realized something alarming. They'd been funding a real estate company with a charismatic CEO who thought he was changing the world. The technology component was basically an app to book desks. The revolutionary business model was signing long-term leases and offering short-term rentals, which was actually incredibly risky, not innovative. The valuation that had been projected at $65 billion started dropping. $60 billion, $50 billion, $40 billion. Major investors pulled out. The financial press, which had been largely positive, turned vicious. Articles with headlines like WeWork's IPO is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen started appearing. Analysts called it one of the worst IPO filings in history. And suddenly, everyone started asking the questions they should have been asking all along. How is renting desks worth more than airline companies? How is a money-losing real estate firm a tech company? How did we all convince ourselves that Adam Neumann was a visionary instead of just a landlord with good marketing? Adam tried to fight back. He went on a media tour trying to sell the vision again. The mission, the consciousness, the community, but this time it didn't work. The magic was gone. The IPO was first postponed, then cancelled entirely. Without the IPO, WeWork couldn't raise more money. Without more money, they couldn't cover their losses. The whole house of cards was collapsing. Board members, the same people who had been cheering Adam on for years, suddenly turned on him. SoftBank, which had invested over $10 billion, demanded change. The pressure mounted. And on September 24, 2019, just 6 weeks after filing for the IPO, Adam Neumann resigned as CEO. The man who had been worth $4 billion on paper was out. Now here's where this story takes a turn that will make your blood boil. Adam Neumann didn't just leave WeWork. He negotiated one of the most generous exit packages in corporate history. SoftBank, desperate to stabilize the company and having already invested billions, essentially paid Adam to go away quietly. The package, $1.7 billion. Let me say that again, $1.7 billion. This included selling his stock back to the company, a $500 million loan, and nearly $200 million in consulting fees. For the privilege of Adam Neumann not being CEO anymore, for cleaning up the mess he created, he was paid over $1 billion. Meanwhile, WeWork laid off thousands of employees, people who had believed in the mission, who had worked 60-hour weeks, who had sacrificed for the dream. They got standard severance packages. Adam got $1 billion. The company's valuation collapsed to $8 billion, down from $47 billion at its peak. Investors lost tens of billions. SoftBank's investment fund posted the worst losses in its history. Employees who had been given stock options as part of their compensation saw them become worthless. But Adam was fine, more than fine. He walked away richer than he'd ever been, with real money this time, not just paper valuations. And this is where we need to ask the uncomfortable question: who was really at fault here? After Adam left, the real work began. WeWork brought in a new CEO, a real estate veteran who immediately started cutting costs. No more free beer on tap everywhere, no more massive parties, no more wave pool companies or private schools. They closed unprofitable locations. They renegotiated leases. They laid off more staff. They stopped talking about consciousness and started talking about profit margins. You know what happened? The company started working. Not spectacularly, but it started functioning like an actual business. They eventually went public in 2021 through a SPAC merger at a fraction of the previous valuation. The company still exists today, operating profitably in many locations, serving real customers who genuinely value the flexible workspace model. Because here's the thing, the core idea wasn't bad. Flexible office space, community-focused work environments, these are real needs. WeWork still has millions of square feet of space and hundreds of thousands of members. The problem was never the product. It was the delusion. It was believing that renting desks was worth more than auto manufacturers. It was a charismatic leader convincing everyone, including himself, that normal business rules didn't apply. So what happened to Adam Neumann after his fall from grace? Did he fade into obscurity? Did he learn humility? Not exactly. In 2022, Adam raised over $300 million for a new company. It's called Flow. It's a residential real estate company that wants to revolutionize apartment living. The pitch: creating community-focused living spaces. Sound familiar? And here's the kicker. One of his major investors is the famous venture capitalist Andreessen Horowitz, who gave him the money after a single one-hour pitch. They said they were betting on Adam's track record as a visionary. His track record of losing billions of dollars, of spectacular corporate failure, and investors are lining up to give him hundreds of millions more. Let's talk about what really happened here, because the story of WeWork isn't just about one charismatic man. It's about all of us. Adam Neumann didn't force investors to give him money. He didn't trick sophisticated billionaires like Masayoshi Son into writing checks for billions of dollars. These were smart people, experienced investors, people who had made fortunes on their judgment. They gave him the money because they wanted to believe. They wanted to find the next Steve Jobs, the next transformative company. They wanted the returns that come from finding a winner early. And in that environment, skepticism becomes the enemy. Questioning the vision means missing out. 26:30. Think about it, every red flag was visible. The losses were enormous and public. The conflicts of interest were documented. The business model was transparently just real estate with better marketing. But pointing these things out meant being the person who didn't get it. It meant being the dinosaur who couldn't see the future. It meant being left behind while everyone else got rich. So investors kept writing checks. Employees kept believing. The media kept writing admiring profiles. Everyone was waiting for someone else to say the emperor had no clothes, but nobody wanted to be that person. This is how bubbles work. This is how mass delusions happen, not through conspiracy or elaborate fraud, but through collective self-deception, through wanting something to be true so badly that we ignore the evidence in front of us. And Adam Neumann, was he a con artist or a true believer? Here's what I think: he was both, and that's what made him so effective. The most dangerous kind of salesman isn't someone who knows they're lying. It's someone who believes their own hype, someone who really does think they're changing the world, someone whose charisma comes from genuine conviction, even when that conviction is completely detached from reality. Adam believed he was special. He believed in the mission. He believed that normal rules didn't apply to him because he was building something revolutionary, and that belief was contagious. It infected investors, employees, the media, everyone around him. The problem is that belief isn't enough. Vision isn't enough. You still need a business that actually works. You still need to create more value than you consume. You still need to live in the real world, where physics and math and economics matter. So what can we learn from the spectacular rise and fall of WeWork? First, charisma is not competence. The ability to inspire people, to tell a compelling story, to make people believe in a vision, these are valuable skills, but they're not the same as actually knowing how to run a business. Adam was a world-class salesman, but a mediocre operator. The tragedy is that nobody around him was willing to tell him that. Second, growth is not success. Silicon Valley fell in love with a model where losing money is fine as long as you're growing fast enough, and sometimes that works. Amazon lost money for years before becoming one of the most valuable companies in the world. But Amazon was building infrastructure and technology that would eventually generate massive profits. WeWork was just signing expensive leases faster than they could fill them. There's a difference between investing in future profits and just spending money recklessly. 30:00. Third, culture can become cult. Creating a strong company culture, making employees feel connected to a mission, these are generally good things. But there's a line. When employees are afraid to question bad decisions because it feels like betraying the faith, when loyalty to the leader trumps concern for the company, when people are crying at corporate events not from joy but from emotional manipulation, you've crossed from culture into something darker. Fourth, governance matters. Adam Neumann had complete control of WeWork through his special voting shares. Nobody could stop him from making terrible decisions. Nobody could force him to slow down or prioritize profitability. The board was essentially powerless. And this is a structure that's common in Silicon Valley, where founders are given enormous control. Sometimes that's good because it lets visionaries execute their plans without interference. But sometimes it lets narcissists drive companies off cliffs while everyone else is trapped in the car. Fifth, and maybe most important, we need to be skeptical of people who claim to be changing the world. Real innovation is usually boring. It's engineers solving technical problems. It's entrepreneurs finding more efficient ways to deliver value. It's not a charismatic leader talking about consciousness and purpose while burning through billions of dollars. The most revolutionary companies in recent history, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple, they weren't led by people who talked like prophets. They were led by people who obsessed over products and customers and business models. The vision emerged from the work, not the other way around. When someone talks more about the mission than the metrics, when they focus more on inspiration than execution, when the story matters more than the results, be skeptical, very skeptical. But let's zoom out even further, because WeWork isn't just a story about one company or one charismatic CEO. It's a story about the decade that created it. The 2010s were a strange time in capitalism. After the 2008 financial crisis, central banks around the world dropped interest rates to nearly zero. Money became incredibly cheap. Investors were desperate for returns, and they couldn't find them in traditional investments like bonds or savings accounts. So they turned to venture capital, to startups, to companies that promised massive growth and disruption, and because money was so cheap and so abundant, the normal rules changed. Companies could lose money indefinitely as long as they were growing. Profitability became optional. Vision became more valuable than revenue. This created an entire ecosystem of companies that couldn't have existed in any other time. Uber, which lost billions of dollars every year. Lyft, same story. DoorDash, Postmates, Bird Scooters, Blue Apron, the list goes on. All of them were built on the same model: grow fast, lose money, figure out profitability later, maybe. WeWork was the logical extreme of this model. It took the ideas that worked for software companies, companies with high margins and infinite scalability, and applied them to real estate, which is the opposite. Real estate is physical, limited, expensive. It has thin margins and enormous fixed costs. But in the era of free money and growth at all costs, those details didn't seem to matter. And for a while, it worked. WeWork grew from $0 to $50 billion in valuation in less than a decade. Adam Neumann became a celebrity. Investors made money on paper. Employees felt like they were part of something historic. The problem is that reality always catches up. The cheap money era had to end eventually. Interest rates would rise again. Investors would start caring about profits. The music would stop, and whoever was left holding unprofitable companies would lose. WeWork's IPO attempt came at exactly the wrong moment. 2019 was when the market started sobering up, when investors started asking hard questions, when the era of infinite funding for unprofitable companies started ending. Today, WeWork operates as a much smaller, quieter company. They have office spaces in cities around the world. They serve real customers. They make real revenue. They're not worth $47 billion, but they're a functional business. Adam Neumann is working on his new company, Flow, trying to apply the same community-focused model to residential real estate. Some people think he's learned from his mistakes. Others think he's just a serial entrepreneur who happened to raise too much money too fast and, given the right constraints, could actually build something sustainable. SoftBank wrote down billions in losses from WeWork. It damaged their reputation and their investors' trust. Masayoshi Son publicly admitted it was a mistake to give Adam so much money with so little oversight. But SoftBank is a massive company with many investments, and they've survived. The employees who believed in the mission, who worked long hours, who sacrificed for WeWork, they have mixed feelings. Some feel betrayed. They gave years of their lives to a company that turned out to be built on hype. They watched their stock options become worthless while the founder walked away with billions. Others say the experience was valuable. They learned about startups, about scaling companies, about what not to do. They built networks and skills. They genuinely enjoyed the community and the energy, even if the business model was broken. And many of them are still friends with each other, because that part was real. The community, the relationships, the feeling of being part of something together. WeWork failed as a business, but it succeeded at creating connections between people. That's worth something, even if it's not worth $47 billion. So here's the question we started with. Was Adam Neumann a con artist, or was he just giving people what they wanted to believe? I think the answer is that he was a mirror. He reflected back what Silicon Valley wanted to see in the 2010s: confidence, vision, growth, disruption, purpose. The idea that you could make money and change the world at the same time, that normal business rules were for dinosaurs and the future belonged to those brave enough to ignore them. Investors wanted to find the next transformative company, so they saw one. Employees wanted to feel like their work mattered, so they did. The media wanted a compelling story about a charismatic founder, so they wrote one. Adam just played the role everyone wanted him to play. But playing a role isn't the same as running a business. Believing in yourself isn't the same as having a plan that works. And convincing other people you're going to change the world isn't the same as actually doing it. The tragedy of WeWork isn't that it failed. Lots of companies fail. The tragedy is how much money was wasted, how many people were hurt, and how the person most responsible for the disaster was the one who profited most from it. Adam Neumann walked away with over $1 billion for losing tens of billions of other people's money. That's not a failure, that's a heist. But it's a heist that everyone participated in willingly. Nobody forced Masayoshi Son to invest $10 billion after a 12-minute meeting. Nobody forced other investors to keep writing checks quarter after quarter while losses mounted. Nobody forced employees to work there or the media to write fawning profiles. We all wanted to believe. We all wanted the story to be true. We all wanted Adam Neumann to be the visionary he claimed to be, because that would mean we were smart for believing in him. It would mean we were part of something historic. And that's the real lesson of WeWork. The biggest lies aren't the ones we're told, they're the ones we tell ourselves. The story of WeWork raises an uncomfortable question about modern capitalism and the startup world we've created. We've built a system where charismatic founders can raise billions of dollars on vision alone, lose all of it, and still walk away wealthy. Where employees and small investors bear the losses while founders are protected by golden parachutes. Where the rewards are privatized but the failures are socialized, borne by laid-off workers and pension funds and retail investors who bought into the dream. Is this really how we want the system to work? Should someone like Adam Neumann be given hundreds of millions more to try again? Or does rewarding spectacular failure just encourage more people to swing for the fences with other people's money, knowing that even if they strike out, they'll be fine? These aren't easy questions. Entrepreneurship requires the freedom to fail. The biggest innovations often come from people who are willing to take crazy risks. If we punish failure too harshly, we might prevent the next Amazon or Apple from being born. But there's a difference between honest failure and reckless waste, between taking calculated risks with your own money and burning through billions of other people's money on private jets and corporate parties. Adam Neumann believed he was building the future. He believed he was changing the world. And maybe, in his own mind, he still believes that. Maybe he thinks the problem was execution, not vision. Maybe he thinks he was just ahead of his time and flow will prove everyone wrong. Or maybe he knows exactly what he did. Maybe he understood all along that in the era of cheap money and growth at all costs, you could build a fortune not by creating value, but by convincing others you could. Maybe he saw the game for what it was and played it better than anyone. We'll probably never know the truth. What's inside Adam Neumann's head, what he really believes versus what he tells himself to sleep at night, that's between him and his conscience. What we can know is what happened. A charismatic man convinced the world that renting desks could be worth more than car companies. He raised tens of billions of dollars. He built a global company with hundreds of locations and thousands of employees. He created a culture that felt like a movement. And then it all fell apart, spectacularly, publicly, and he walked away with over $1 billion while everyone else absorbed the losses. The fall of WeWork is one of the defining business stories of our time. It's a story about ambition and delusion, about charisma and incompetence, about how smart people can convince themselves of stupid things when the incentives are right. It's a story about what happens when you confuse growth with success, culture with cult, and vision with reality. It's a story about how in the era of cheap money and Silicon Valley disruption, a man could turn office space into a religion and himself into a profit. Until the day the congregation realized they'd been worshipping a false god. But most of all, it's a story about us, about our capacity for collective self-deception, about how badly we want to believe in something bigger than ourselves, even when the evidence says we shouldn't. Adam Newman didn't fool anyone who didn't want to be fooled. He just showed us what we wanted to see. And that, more than anything else, is why his story matters. Because the next Adam Newman is out there right now, raising money, building a company, telling a compelling story about changing the world. And we'll probably believe that one too. The question is, will we learn anything from this? Or will we keep falling for the same beautiful lies over and over again until the next empire of empty promises comes crashing down? So here's what I want to know from you. If you were an investor and Adam Newman came to you tomorrow with a new company and a brilliant pitch, would you give him your money? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether this story changes how you see charismatic founders, or if you still believe some people deserve a second chance, no matter how spectacular their failure.